The storm outside Street Vincent Hospital beat relentlessly against the tall glass windows, rain sliding in thin, cold sheets, bouncing off the roof in a rhythm that mirrored Clara James's own pounding heartbeat. She sat stiffly in a cheap plastic chair in the hospital corridor, her hands clutching the hem of her thrift store dress until her knuckles whitened. Outside, puddles formed and splashed as the wind tore branches from trees, but inside, the air was heavy with antiseptic, the smell stinging her nose as sharply as the reality pressing down upon her. Clara's gaze drifted past the ICU doors, where the steady beep of monitors tracked the fragile thread of life inside. Ethan Cole, the 32-year-old billionaire heir to the Cole fortune, lay motionless in a bed surrounded by machines and tangled tubes, his once commanding presence reduced to pale, still flesh beneath the cold hospital lights. His accident had left him in a coma for months, untouchable and unreachable, yet he had become the center of Clara's impossible dilemma. At the head of the group surrounding her, Aunt Margaret stood like a statue of authority, her designer coat perfectly pressed, shoes clicking deliberately against the tile. Her voice was low, measured, but carried an unmistakable command. "Clara, you will do this. Your sister ran off. The wedding can't be canceled. Do you understand the shame it would bring if people found out?" Clara's lips trembled. She tried to speak, tried to protest, but the words lodged in her throat like splinters. Her eyes drifted to the hospital bed again, to Ethan's motionless face framed by dark hair, the chest rising and falling mechanically, a rhythm as artificial as her situation. "I'm not his fiancé. I'm not supposed to," she whispered, the words barely audible, as if saying them louder might summon Aunt Margaret's wrath. Margaret's sharp tone cut through the tension like a blade. "The engagement contract was signed. If the marriage doesn't happen, your mother's hospital bills won't be covered. Do you want to see her treatment stopped?" Clara's throat tightened, and her body shivered despite the warmth of the corridor. Her mother, frail and coughing blood in a distant clinic, had been relying on this very arrangement. She had watched her mother's life hang by a thread for weeks, and now, somehow, she had to sacrifice herself to preserve it. A lawyer stepped forward, a crisp suit and clipped demeanor, a man who brought no comfort, only the weight of legality. He held out a manila folder. "All that is required is your signature," he said. "A civil ceremony can be conducted here in the hospital chapel tomorrow. Just a formality. You will be Mrs. Cole. Nothing more. No one needs to know the truth." Clara's hands shook violently as she reached for the pen. Her gaze flicked back to Ethan's face. She remembered seeing him once, untouchable, on the cover of Forbes, cameras flashing around him like halos. Now he was still, fragile, and oblivious to the world, or to her. She swallowed the lump of despair lodged in her throat and signed the papers. The scratch of the pen on paper sounded unnaturally loud in the otherwise silent corridor. The next day, under the dim glow of the hospital chapel's stained glass windows, Clara faced the priest, her dress pressed but modest, borrowed and plain compared to the wealth around her. A nurse wheeled Ethan in, monitors beeping their cold mechanical song, and a simple gold band was slipped onto her trembling finger. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest intoned, his words hanging in the air with hollow finality. The clap of applause never came. Only the faint hum of machines bore witness. That evening, as Clara remained alone in the sterile hospital room, the storm outside finally began to break. She drew a chair close to Ethan's bed, staring down at him, her mother's locket clutched tightly in her hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I never wanted this, but I had no choice." She set the locket down beside his hand as if anchoring herself to something real in the chaos. The monitors hummed on, indifferent, yet for Clara, every beep was a heartbeat of possibility, a chance that maybe, just maybe, He would awaken to see her as more than a temporary substitute, a pawn in a cruel arrangement. Across the city, her apartment was cold and gray, a stark contrast to the sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital. Bills piled up like threatening towers on her kitchen table, electricity overdue, rent unpaid, pharmacy notices demanding payment. She stirred a mug of weak coffee that tasted like little more than water, her stomach growling in protest, yet she ignored it. Every call she avoided, every message left unanswered was a desperate attempt to pretend she could control the chaos. Her mother's fragile voice came from the other room, muffled by blankets. "Did you sleep, Mom?" Clara asked, kneeling beside her. Her mother's faint smile and gentle squeeze of her hand reminded Clara why she had made the impossible choice. Hours later, Clara returned to the hospital, every step echoing her growing dread and quiet determination. Family members in tailored suits passed by, whispers following her like shadows. Cousin Lydia's voice pierced the corridor. "Can you believe it? Clara James married into the Cole fortune, the girl who couldn't even pay her own rent." The laughter cut deep, but Clara lowered her head and gripped her satchel tighter. That evening, when her landlord knocked with a clipped demand for rent, she pleaded for time. "You've said that before," he snapped. "End of the month. You must vacate." Clara pressed her forehead to the door, chest heavy, mind racing. She had married a man in a coma to save her mother, yet now, even that small victory felt like chains tightening around her. Picking up her sketchbook, the one item she had cherished since high school, she opened it to a blank page and began to draw. Not Ethan, not the life she had been forced into, but her mother's fragile, brave smile. As midnight approached, Clara was back in the hospital, sitting at Ethan's bedside, the gold ring on her finger feeling like a shackle. She whispered again, "I'll stay, at least until you wake up. Someone should." Her words hung in the quiet hum of machines, a promise to protect, endure, and survive. The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, and for the first time since signing the papers, Clara allowed herself a flicker of hope. A bond had begun to form, fragile, unseen, yet unbroken. The morning sun struggled through gray clouds, Clara's satchel heavy with unpaid bills and sketchbooks as she prepared to face another day of hospital corridors, family whispers, and the uncertain hope that the man lying unconscious before her might one day wake and see her, not as a pawn, but as someone who had risked everything for him. The fluorescent lights of Street Vincent Hospital hummed a monotonous antiseptic song, bouncing off the polished floors and whitewashed walls. Clara James had begun to memorize every sound, every rhythm, every shadow that fell across the sterile corridors. The faint squeak of a nurse's shoes, the beeping of monitors, the distant echo of a doctor's hurried footsteps. It all became the soundtrack of her new life. Life as Mrs. Cole, a title she had been forced to accept, though it felt more like a shackle than a privilege. Every morning, Clara entered the hospital in the same thrift store dress, now worn and faded from constant use, a satchel heavy with sketchbooks and unpaid bills slung across her shoulder. Her mother's fragile health relied on the arrangement she had been coerced into, and yet every step into those halls reminded her how far she had fallen into a world she didn't belong. The ICU was a kingdom of small miracles and quiet tragedies. Ethan Cole lay in his bed, pale and silent, monitors beeping a mechanical rhythm that measured his existence. He remained oblivious to the world, oblivious to Clara's presence, to her whispered promises, to the locket she had placed beside his hand. Yet in that silence, Clara had begun to detect small signs of life. A finger twitch, a slight shift of his hand, almost imperceptible, like the faintest ripple across still water. She often found herself holding his hand, tracing the lines of his palm, the veins beneath the skin, murmuring to him as if the sound of her voice could pierce the fog of unconsciousness. "I'm here, Ethan," she whispered, though the monitors did not respond. "I won't leave you, not while you need someone." Her life outside the hospital was a stark contrast. Bills piled up on her kitchen table in a silent accusation: overdue rent, unpaid electricity, pharmacy notices. Every day, Clara juggled the impossible. She had no money, no social standing, no one outside her mother to rely upon, and even her mother was a constant reminder of why she had made this unbearable choice. When Clara entered the hospital that afternoon, she was greeted by the usual whispers and sneers from her extended family. Cousin Lydia, draped in designer silk and a smirk that could cut glass, leaned toward another relative and said loudly enough for Clara to hear, "Can you believe it? Clara James, sitting at the bedside of the coal heir like she belongs. A charity case in thrift store shoes." Clara felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not look up. She clutched her satchel tighter and continued her quiet routine. Her life had become a series of small, controlled movements, a dance around judgment and desperation. She wiped her tears in the bathroom before entering Ethan's room, lest the machines detect any weakness. Even the nurses, though kind in their own way, reinforced the tension. One morning, Nurse Paula gently reminded her, "Mrs. Cole, the family requested you join dinner at the estate tonight. Formal attire is expected." Clara shook her head internally. Dinner at the mansion? She could barely survive in her own apartment, let alone a world of gold, silk, and judgmental gazes. Each visit brought new threats. Andrew Fletcher, the Cole estate lawyer, came frequently with agreements and conditions, reminding her that her role was legally recognized but strictly defined. No interference in corporate matters, no public appearances without approval, no claims to assets. Every word was another chain, another reminder that she existed in a gilded cage she had not chosen. Yet in the quiet moments, Clara found herself discovering humanity in the man who could not respond. She sketched him daily, capturing the lines of his face, the gentle curve of his eyelashes, the subtle tension in his jaw. Even in unconsciousness, he seemed alive in her hands. Each page of her sketchbook became a testament to her devotion, a silent declaration that she was there not for money, not for status, but for him as a person. And then the small signs, the faintest movements, began to appear more frequently. A finger curling slightly, a hand shifting under the blanket, a flutter of an eyelid. Clara froze the first time she noticed. Could it be real? She reached out, gently holding his hand, whispering softly, "Ethan, if you can hear me, fight. I'll stay here, I promise." The hospital room, bathed in harsh fluorescent light, became her world, her sanctuary, and her prison. She learned every sound, the hiss of oxygen, the faint click of machines, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. And yet, even amidst this monotony, Clara could not ignore the rising tension of her life outside these walls. At home, the landlord's patience had run out. "Clara, the rent is 2 weeks overdue. I can't keep letting this slide. You'll have to vacate at the end of the month." His clipped words rang in her ears like a death knell. She pressed her forehead against the door, the cold wood biting her skin, and whispered to herself, "I have to hold on. For Mom. For him." Her mother, ever fragile, coughed quietly in the background, unaware of the full weight of her daughter's sacrifices. Clara knelt beside her, adjusting blankets, spooning medicine with care, masking her own exhaustion. Every act of care was a tether, keeping her grounded in a world that threatened to overwhelm her. Back in the hospital, the small miracles persisted. One evening, after hours spent at his bedside, Clara noticed a slight curl of Ethan's fingers around hers. Her breath caught. She pulled her hand back slightly, then pressed it gently against his again, whispering, "It's okay." I'm here. You're not alone. The machines hummed on, indifferent yet intimate in their rhythm. The outside world continued to press in, relentless in its demands. Cousin Lydia's taunts, Aunt Margaret's cold calculations, the threat of unpaid bills, all collided with the fragile hope growing in Clara's chest. She balanced the impossible, and the tension mounted each day like a coiled spring. And then, one night, as the hospital was quiet save for the gentle beep of monitors, a subtle miracle occurred. Ethan's hand twitched deliberately, just enough for Clara to see. Tears stung her eyes as she pressed it to her chest, whispering fiercely, "I'm here. I won't leave you." A faint smile played across her lips, the first sign of hope in weeks. But the storm outside continued, the world demanding her attention, pulling her in multiple directions. Would he awaken fully? Would her sacrifices be recognized? Or would she remain a ghost in the life of the man whose name she now bore, yet who had never truly known her? That night, Clara returned home to her apartment, the city dark and silent around her. She sat beside her sleeping mother, her sketchbook open to Ethan's profile, and whispered a vow into the quiet. "One day, you'll wake up, and you'll see me, not as a pawn, but as someone who never gave up on you." The air hung heavy, charged with possibility, the weight of her forced marriage now mingled with the faint spark of hope. Somewhere, in the quiet hum of the hospital machines, a change was coming. Days had blurred into nights, and nights into days. The storm outside had long since passed, leaving the city soaked and gleaming in the weak morning light. But inside, Clara's life remained under siege. Bills pressed down like invisible weights, her mother's fragile health demanded constant attention, and the shadow of her family's manipulation loomed over her every movement. Yet here, in the hushed corridors of the ICU, small miracles began to surface. Ethan's hand, once still as stone, twitched subtly under the hospital blankets. Clara froze, heart pounding like a drum. She leaned closer, careful not to alarm the monitors, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, can you hear me? I'm here. I haven't left." No answer came, but the gentle curling of his fingers around hers told her more than words ever could. For the first time, Clara felt the weight of hope, a fragile, trembling ember that she dared not extinguish. The following morning, Clara arrived early, sketchbook and mother's locket in hand. The hospital corridors were empty, save for the distant clatter of nurses preparing for rounds. She moved silently, like a shadow, her footsteps measured against the antiseptic-scented floor. At Ethan's bedside, she found something different. The corner of his lips, pale and still, had curled upward slightly, a sign, however faint, of awareness. Her hands shook as she reached to adjust his blankets, whispering softly, "It's okay, Ethan. You're safe. I'm here." The day passed in the quiet cadence of monitoring machines, interrupted only by the occasional nurse or doctor. Yet for Clara, every movement, every subtle shift carried significance. She documented them carefully in her sketchbook, noting the tiniest of gestures, the furrow of a brow, the twitch of a finger, the faintest shift in posture. Each page was a silent testament, a chronicle of her vigil. Outside, the world continued to spin relentlessly. Her apartment remained a battlefield. Unpaid rent, overdue electricity, pharmacy bills she could barely afford. The landlord's threats were constant, reminding her of the precariousness of her life. Yet each visit to Ethan's room gave her strength, a strange blend of fear and determination, the knowledge that someone depended on her unwavering presence. Then came the evening that would mark the first turning point. Clara had been at Ethan's bedside for hours, humming the lullaby her mother had sung to her as a child. Her pencil hovered above the sketchbook, capturing the curve of his cheek, the faint tension in his jaw. And then, a flutter. His eyelids trembled, a delicate, imperceptible sign. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She leaned closer, her hand pressing gently against his, whispering, "Ethan, I'm here. You're not alone. Fight." The flutter repeated, more deliberate this time. His fingers moved slightly, curling against hers. Tears sprang to her eyes, and she pressed his hand to her chest, whispering fervently, "I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever. You'll wake. I promise." In that moment, the hospital room became a sanctuary, a cocoon of fragile possibility. Outside, the city lights glimmered against rain-soaked streets, indifferent to the quiet miracle unfolding within the walls of the ICU. The following days became a careful dance of observation and subtle connection. Clara spoke to him constantly, reading aloud from her mother's favorite novels, recounting memories, even sharing her frustrations with her family and the relentless pressure of her dual life. And he responded in the smallest ways: a twitch, a shift of the hand, a slight tilt of the head. It was during one of these quiet nights that Lydia, ever the intruder, appeared at the doorway. Perfume thick in the air, heels clicking against the tiles, she sneered at Clara. "Still here? Playing the devoted wife to a man who doesn't even know your name?" Clara's chest tightened, but she did not flinch. She cradled Ethan's hand gently, whispering, "I'm here because someone has to be. Not for them, not for money, but for you." Lydia laughed, sharp and cruel, then swept away, leaving only the echo of her disdain. Clara exhaled, heart heavy but resolve hardening. The stakes had never been higher. Every gesture, every whispered word became a lifeline. Days stretched into weeks. Each morning Clara arrived early. Each night she lingered long after visiting hours, documenting every subtle shift, every sign of awakening. And then, one afternoon, the first undeniable sign came. Ethan's fingers curled fully around hers. His grip, though weak, was deliberate, unmistakable. Clara gasped, pressing it to her chest, tears streaming freely. "I see you, Ethan," she whispered. "I see you and I'm here. Fight for me, for yourself. I won't leave." Wordlessly, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Outside, rain fell lightly, washing the city in muted gray. Inside, the small gestures became proof that their bond, forced, reluctant at first, yet now genuine and unbreakable, was taking root. But the outside world refused to let her forget. Letters arrived, threats whispered, and Andrew Fletcher, the estate lawyer, reminded her frequently of the fragile balance she maintained. "Mrs. Cole," he said coldly one morning, "you will not interfere in corporate matters. You will maintain discretion. Remember the terms of your agreement." Clara's chest tightened. The legal chains remained, yet the human connection, the subtle awakening of Ethan's consciousness, was a chain of another kind. It bound her heart, her resolve, and now it offered the promise of a future beyond mere survival. One night, exhausted but unwilling to leave, Clara rested her head near Ethan's bed, sketchbook open on her lap. A single tear fell onto the page, smudging the charcoal lines of his face. And then, almost imperceptibly, his eyelids fluttered again. Just once. Just enough for Clara to catch her breath, her hand pressed gently to his. "I see you, Ethan," she whispered fiercely, "and I will never abandon you. Not now. Not ever." The weight of her forced marriage remained, but for the first time, it felt less like a prison and more like a bridge, one she had built with patience, vigilance, and love. Later that night, as Clara returned home to her apartment, she noticed a small envelope slipped under her door. No name, no sender, just the ominous words, "Leave him, or face the consequences." The city outside was silent, But inside, Clara felt the tension tighten. Would her dedication to Ethan be enough to overcome the threats looming from every corner of her life? Or would the fragile awakening she had nurtured be shattered before it could bloom? The first rays of morning filtered through the blinds, casting faint stripes across Clara's modest apartment. She sat at the kitchen table, coffee lukewarm, eyes fixed on the envelope that had been slipped under her door the night before. No return address, no signature. Only 3 words. Leave him, or face the consequences. Her fingers trembled as she traced the black ink, her mind racing. Every step she had taken to protect her mother and stand by Ethan now felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Yet she refused to let fear dictate her actions. The man in the hospital bed, her husband in name, but more importantly, the man who depended on her, was awakening, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The day began as always. Clara navigated the sterile corridors of St. Vincent Hospital, sat at Ethan's bedside, and watched the machines hum, listening for any change. She brought her sketchbook, capturing the faint lines of expression on his face, documenting every twitch, every flicker of awareness. And then, just as she feared the monotony of waiting might crush her spirit, a subtle miracle occurred. Ethan's fingers twitched, not once, but twice, more deliberate than before. Clara's heart leapt. She pressed her hand gently to his, whispering, "I'm here. I've never left. You're safe. You'll see it all soon." Yet the miracle came with a shadow. As she leaned closer, the door creaked, and Aunt Margaret appeared, her eyes sharp, her smile tight. "Still here, Clara?" she asked, voice deceptively sweet. "You do realize the world doesn't revolve around you, do you? Mr. Cole has been unconscious for months, and now that he's responding, it seems you've made yourself indispensable." Clara felt her chest tighten, but she held her ground, fingers still clutching Ethan's. "I'm here because he needs someone," she said firmly. "I'm not here for anything else." Margaret's lips thinned. "And yet, you signed every agreement we required. Convenient, isn't it?" She glanced around the room, ensuring the nurses had left. "I wonder, Clara, how long you think your influence will last once he fully wakes? How long before he realizes what this arrangement really is?" Clara's jaw tightened. She had rehearsed responses like this for weeks. "When he wakes," she said slowly, "he will see the truth. I stayed by choice, not because anyone forced me to, but because someone had to. And I'm proud of that." Margaret's expression hardened, but she said nothing more, stepping back into the shadows of the hallway. Clara exhaled slowly, heart racing. The world outside this hospital room was merciless, but at least in these moments, she was building a fortress of truth and resilience. The next challenge came in the form of Lydia. That afternoon, the cousin appeared again, dripping in silk, heels echoing against the tiles. "I see you're still playing the devoted wife," she sneered. "Do you really think your little acts of kindness will make up for the deception you represent?" Clara's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "I never deceived him. They forced me into this, yes. But every moment I've spent here has been to care for him. Not for money, not for status. For him." Lydia laughed, sharp and bitter. "We'll see how long that lasts." And with a flick of her wrist, she disappeared, leaving Clara alone with the steady rhythm of the monitors and the faint, almost imperceptible twitch of Ethan's fingers. In the evenings, Clara returned home to care for her mother, the weight of unpaid bills pressing down like a physical force. Each night, she poured medicine, adjusted blankets, and whispered reassurances she hoped her mother could sense, even in sleep. It was exhausting, grueling work, but she reminded herself of why she endured it. Because someone had to be strong. Because someone had to fight. Days stretched into weeks, each one marked not by calendars, but by small signs of life from Ethan. A flutter of an eyelid, the faintest shift of a finger, a gentle exhalation through his nostrils. Clara documented everything meticulously in her sketchbook, charcoal portraits capturing not just his face, but the spirit she felt stirring beneath it. And then came the breakthrough. One evening, as the hospital was quiet save for the soft hum of machines, Ethan's hand moved decisively, curling, gripping Clara's fingers fully. Her breath caught. She pressed it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "I see you," she whispered. "You're alive. Fight for me. For yourself. I won't leave." But even as hope bloomed, Clara felt the tension of the outside world pressing in. Andrew Fletcher arrived later that week, crisp suit, expression cold. "Mrs. Cole," he began, voice clipped. "The family expects full compliance with all agreements. You understand the implications, yes? Any interference, any public disclosure, will be met with consequences. Your mother's treatment depends on your discretion." Clara's chest tightened. She nodded slowly, understanding the trap. The stakes had never been higher. Care for Ethan, protect her mother, and navigate the relentless scrutiny and manipulation of a family who valued wealth and appearances over humanity. Yet the signs of Ethan's awakening continued to mount. During a quiet night, his eyelids fluttered repeatedly, lips parting slightly, fingers twitching under her gentle touch. Clara felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. "I won't let anyone control this," she whispered. "I won't let them take him away from me, from himself, from the truth." Soon the hospital staff began to notice. Nurse Paula, gentle yet observant, caught a fleeting smile from Ethan, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. "Mrs. Cole," she said quietly, "you're doing something remarkable here. I've never seen a patient respond like this." Clara smiled faintly, exhaustion etched on her face. "I'm just staying. That's all." But inside, she knew it was more than that. Every whispered word, every sketch, every small gesture of care had become a lifeline, pulling Ethan back from the edge of unconsciousness. The family, meanwhile, remained a constant storm. Letters, threats, legal reminders, and the ever-present Lydia attempted to fracture Clara's resolve. But with each challenge, Clara's determination hardened. She had witnessed small miracles. She had felt the fragile stirrings of a man returning to life. She would not abandon him, no matter the cost. One evening, as Clara sat by Ethan's bedside, adjusting the blanket and tracing his face in her sketchbook, the door opened quietly. A shadow fell across the room. It was Lydia, but this time she held something in her hand, a small sealed envelope with a bold warning scrawled across it. "One wrong move, and he will never wake fully." Clara's heart pounded. The battle was no longer just about awakening. It was about protecting what they had rebuilt, the fragile connection between them, from those who would see it destroyed. The room seemed to hold its breath, the monitors humming steadily, as Clara clutched Ethan's hand tighter. Every twitch, every flutter, every sign of awareness now carried a new weight. The forces outside the hospital walls were relentless, but inside, a small fortress of truth, loyalty, and hope was being forged. One day, one sketch, one whispered promise at a time. The morning sun barely pierced the thick gray clouds above the city, casting muted light across Clara's modest apartment. She stirred awake, coffee in hand, already running through the day ahead. Ethan's room at St. Vincent Hospital waited, the sterile hum of machines calling her to vigilance once more. Clara's fingers brushed her mother's locket before she left, a talisman against the storm that never truly ended outside the hospital walls. Every step she took to protect her mother, every late-night vigil, every sketch in her well-worn sketchbook had brought her here. to the cusp of something monumental. As she entered the ICU, the familiar chorus of beeping machines greeted her. Yet something felt different this morning. A subtle energy filled the room, a tension in the air that made the hair on her arms rise. Ethan Cole, her husband in name, but more importantly the man who depended on her, was no longer just flickering in signs of life. He was moving deliberately. His fingers curled fully around hers, not weakly this time, but with purpose. His eyelids fluttered repeatedly, his gaze, though unfocused, seemed to search the room. Clara's breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm here. I haven't left. You're safe. Fight for me. For yourself." The miracle, however, brought a new storm. Andrew Fletcher arrived shortly afterward, his expression sharp and unreadable. "Mrs. Cole," he said formally, "I need to discuss recent developments. Your husband's awareness is increasing, and it is imperative that you comply with all legal and family stipulations. Any deviation could jeopardize the Cole estate or your mother's continued care." Clara's chest tightened, but she remained steadfast. "I'm not here for money, Mr. Fletcher. I'm here because someone has to be. That's all." Fletcher's gaze lingered on her, unreadable. "Very well. But remember, Mrs. Cole, the stakes are higher than ever. Observation and discretion are not optional." As Fletcher left, Clara felt the weight of responsibility deepen. Every twitch, every flutter from Ethan was no longer just a sign of life. It was a reminder that truth, loyalty, and love were being tested against greed, manipulation, and expectation. Later that afternoon, Lydia appeared again, her heels echoing against the hospital tiles. Her perfume, suffocating and sharp, announced her presence before her voice. "Still clinging?" she mocked. "Do you really think he'll forgive all this deception when he fully awakens?" Clara's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "I never deceived him," she said firmly. "They forced me into this, yes. But every moment I've spent here has been for him. Not for money, not for status. For him." Lydia's eyes narrowed, but she smiled thinly, almost enjoying the confrontation. "We'll see how long that lasts." The day's tension gave way to a quiet evening. Clara sat by Ethan's side, sketchbook open, pencil hovering above paper. She drew his face, capturing every line, every shadow, every flicker of life she could sense. And then, without warning, Ethan's eyelids opened fully. His gaze met hers, hazel eyes wide, searching and confused. Clara froze, heart pounding. "Ethan, it's me. Clara. You're awake. You're safe." For a long moment he did not respond. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the sterile walls, the monitors, the sketchbook clutched in her hands. "Clara?" His voice was weak, hoarse, barely a whisper. "Yes," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "It's me. I'm here. I stayed." Ethan's expression flickered between confusion, recognition, and something deeper, an understanding slowly dawning. But the world outside their quiet bubble refused to pause. Aunt Margaret's voice cut through the tense calm. "Ethan," she said sharply, stepping into the room with her polished, commanding presence. "You're awake. Good. Now, we must discuss the implications of this marriage. The estate, the company, everything hinges on the legality of your wife's actions while you were incapacitated." Clara's chest tightened, but she did not let her resolve waver. "Everything I did was for him," she said quietly, gesturing toward Ethan. "Not for you. Not for money. For him. And for my mother, whose treatment depended on every choice I made." Ethan blinked, processing the tension and weight of the situation. Is that true?" he asked softly, voice still fragile. Yes, Clara said, unwavering. I never wanted this. They forced me. But I stayed because you had no one else, and someone needed to care for you. Margaret's expression hardened, but she said nothing more, stepping back. Clara exhaled slowly, relief mingling with exhaustion. She had survived the first confrontation, but the battle was far from over. Over the next few days, the Cole family's secrets began to unravel. Whispers of financial manipulations, hidden contracts, and orchestrated schemes came to light. Documents, letters, and even recordings hinted at long-standing deceit designed to control Ethan's fortune and image. Each revelation was a dagger, yet also a key, unlocking the truth that Clara had been seeking. Ethan, still fragile but regaining strength, turned to Clara one evening in the quiet of the hospital room. I see them now, he whispered. All of them. And I see you. You stayed. You didn't need to, but you did. You stayed. Clara's eyes welled with tears. I had to. For you. For my mother. For truth. I never wanted this marriage, but I never wanted to abandon you either. Ethan's hand moved, weakly at first, then with more intent, covering hers. You chose loyalty, and that is worth more than anything they could have given us. Even as the bond between them deepened, threats persisted. Anonymous letters, subtle warnings, and legal pressures kept Clara on edge. But now, Ethan was awake, alert, and increasingly aware. With each passing day, they strategized together, protecting his health, revealing the family's deception, and safeguarding their fragile connection. The emotional payoff came slowly but surely. Clara watched as Ethan regained his strength, not just physically, but emotionally. Each small victory, a smile, a laugh, a shared memory, became a lifeline. Their connection, once forged under duress, blossomed into a genuine partnership, built on trust, courage, and the shared trials that had brought them together. Yet the stakes continued to rise. The Cole family, humiliated by Ethan's awakening and the revelations Clara had helped uncover, pressed harder. Legal battles loomed. Social scrutiny intensified. Lydia's taunts became sharper, more aggressive, hinting at actions that could jeopardize both Clara's safety and Ethan's recovery. One evening, as they reviewed documents in the quiet of the hospital room, Ethan's hand brushed hers. Clara, he said softly, whatever comes next, I need you to know I trust you, and I choose you. Not because of this contract, not because of any obligation. I choose you because you stayed when no one else did. Clara's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. For weeks, she had endured isolation, judgment, and relentless pressure. Yet here, in the quiet hospital room, the world narrowed to the bond they had forged. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "And I choose you, Ethan. Always. No matter the threats, no matter the past. I stayed for you, and I will continue to stay. Because this is real." As night fell, a sharp knock echoed through the hospital room. Fletcher's voice carried a warning, cold and deliberate. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole, there are documents you need to sign immediately. Failure to comply will trigger irreversible consequences." Clara felt the weight of the world pressing down again. Would they be forced to comply with further manipulation? Or would Ethan, now fully awake, take control and rewrite the rules of their lives? The answer remained unknown. But for the first time, Clara believed they could face it together. The morning sun rose softly over the city, spilling golden light across Clara's modest apartment. For the first time in weeks, the light didn't feel harsh or judgmental. It felt like a promise that the trials of the past, the storm of deceit, and the weight of forced choices could finally give way to clarity, courage, and love. Clara had barely slept, her mind racing with the events of the previous days. Ethan's awakening had changed everything. The twitches, the fleeting glances of recognition, the whispered moments of connection, all of it had built a bridge between them. And now, with Fletcher's ominous knock still ringing in her memory, Clara knew the real battle had begun. As she entered St. Vincent Hospital, the familiar hum of machines greeted her. But this time, it wasn't oppressive. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat that reminded her that life, true life, was stirring in Ethan. She approached his bedside, sketchbook in hand, ready to capture the man who had silently endured her presence, her care, and her unwavering devotion. Ethan's eyes opened fully as she arrived, Hazel searching Hazel for Hazel. He smiled faintly, a weary but genuine smile. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice steadier than the day before. "Good morning," Clara replied softly, brushing his dark hair from his forehead. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some. Better, I think. Because you were here." His fingers twitched again, this time deliberately reaching for hers. The simple act sent a rush of warmth through Clara, the first real sign that the man she had protected, sacrificed for, and feared would never accept her, was alive and choosing to be present. But the outside world refused to slow down. Fletcher arrived promptly, legal documents in hand, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Cole, Mr. Cole," he said, formal and clipped. "Due to recent developments, immediate signatures are required to maintain legal compliance. Failure to execute these documents could trigger irreversible consequences for both parties, including the withdrawal of support for essential medical care." Clara exhaled slowly, her mind racing. But this time, she was not alone. Ethan, fully aware, fully awake, spoke with an authority that silenced the tension in the room. "Clara, we will face this together. I am awake. I am aware. And we will not be manipulated any longer." Fletcher's eyes flicked between them, calculating. Ethan's steady presence altered the dynamics entirely. No longer was Clara alone, a vulnerable pawn in a cruel game. She had a partner, a husband by choice and now by intent, ready to stand beside her. The first confrontation came swiftly. Aunt Margaret appeared, her sharp gaze cutting the air. "Ethan, you cannot simply ignore the obligations of this marriage. Clara, your actions have complicated everything. Contracts were signed. Appearances must be maintained." Ethan's gaze, steady and unwavering, fixed on her. "No, Margaret. The only obligations that matter are truth, loyalty, and the life of the people I care about. Clara stayed when everyone else abandoned me. She did not manipulate or deceive me, she chose to care. And that choice changes everything." The room fell silent. Even Lydia's confident smirk faltered under the weight of Ethan's words. Clara, holding her sketchbook like armor, stepped forward. "It's true," she said quietly but firmly. "I never wanted this marriage. I never claimed to be anyone else. But I stayed because he needed someone, and because my mother needed help. I am not a pawn. I am a person who made a choice, even under impossible circumstances." Gasps echoed through the room. Margaret's face hardened, but she could not deny the undeniable. Ethan leaned closer to Clara, placing his hand over hers. The gesture, small yet deliberate, sent a wave of relief and quiet triumph through her. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of public revelation and private reconciliation. The Cole family's secrets, hidden contracts, financial manipulations, and orchestrated schemes began to surface, largely thanks to Ethan's determination to set things right. Clara stayed by his side, guiding him through the social and corporate minefield, while he learned to navigate the world anew, fully awake and increasingly in control. One evening, Ethan invited Clara to the estate gardens. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and earth, leaves burning gold and crimson beneath their feet. She walked beside him, still nervous in the shadow of immense wealth, but his hand in hers steadied her. At the center of the garden, under a stone arch twined with roses, a small gathering waited. Trusted friends, loyal employees, and her mother in a wheelchair, eyes bright with anticipation. Clara's breath caught. "Ethan, what is all this?" He held a velvet box in his hands. Inside gleamed a simple diamond ring, the kind that symbolized choice, love, and genuine connection, not contracts or obligation. "Our first wedding," he said softly, "was forged in desperation and lies. But this one, I want to be ours. I want it to be real. I want it to be my choice and yours. Will you marry me again, Clara? Not because of contracts, not because of family pressure, but because we choose each other?" Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. She thought of the hospital chapel, the forced signatures, the nights spent at his bedside, the weight of her mother's care, and the isolation she had endured. And now, finally, all chains had fallen away. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling, then stronger. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." The small crowd erupted in soft, joyful applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He rose, pulling her into his arms. This kiss, unlike any before, was born of choice, love, and mutual respect. It was a seal on a bond forged in adversity, now freely given and freely received. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Ethan navigated the public aftermath. The press speculated wildly, but Ethan shielded Clara from every flashing camera, every invasive question. At home, in their quiet apartment, they began the slow, tender process of building a life together. Not one imposed by contracts or family manipulation, but one created from trust, respect, and love. Clara continued to sketch, filling her books with portraits not of fear or obligation, but of life, hope, and the people she cherished. Ethan often watched her, marveling at the dedication, courage, and heart that had kept him alive when he could not fight for himself. "You kept me alive," he murmured one evening, tracing the lines of her charcoal portraits. "And you gave me a reason to keep drawing," Clara replied, leaning against him, smiling softly. Her mother's health improved steadily, treatment continuing under the protection of their united presence. Clara's sacrifices were now acknowledged, not taken for granted, and the bond between mother and daughter, strengthened by years of hardship, flourished in a way that no forced marriage or threat could undo. The Cole family, humbled and confronted by the truth, gradually adapted. Margaret's rigidity softened slightly in the face of undeniable evidence that Clara's choices had saved Ethan's life and protected the family's reputation. Lydia, though still sharp-tongued, learned that manipulation could not overpower loyalty, courage, and love. The final test came when Ethan convened a board meeting at Cole Enterprises. Clara, quietly observing from the edge, witnessed him assert his authority with renewed confidence, protecting her and the integrity of their shared life. The shareholders, lawyers, and family members realized that the power once wielded to control had now been redirected to uphold truth and fairness. In a quiet moment afterward, Ethan took Clara's hand. "Clara, I cannot erase the way this began, but I can choose now, and I choose you. Every day, I will choose you." Clara's heart swelled. For so long her life had been a series of choices forced upon her, each one a compromise between survival and integrity. But here at last was a choice freely given, one that affirmed her courage, her heart, and her worth. "And I choose you, Ethan," she whispered. "Always. No matter the past, no matter the threats, no matter what anyone says, I choose us. Together, they built a life founded not on contracts, coercion, or obligation, but on mutual respect, love, and shared trials. Their story, once whispered in hospital corridors and fraught with danger, became a testament to resilience, hope, and the transformative power of loyalty. For Clara, the woman who had been forced into a marriage under unimaginable circumstances, what began as a cruel mistake became the greatest blessing. And for Ethan, the man who had once lain silent and helpless, the choice to love her, freely and fully, became the only contract that would ever truly matter. Outside their window, city lights shimmered, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Inside, Clara and Ethan embraced the quiet victory of truth, love, and choice, knowing that every tear, every sleepless night, and every act of courage had led them here, to a life neither expected but both had earned.